Oh, he's barely in the frame.
Barely. Good morning.
Good morning. We greet you, and Drinky Bird drinks you as he greets you.
Drinky Bird drinks you.
Yes.
It's kind of meta. And here's the cat to knock over the bird.
Yep. She's been pretty good at knocking over things lately. I think she's been honing her skills, and this would be an interesting, shall we say, shattering event. If she
Oh,
manages.
yes.
I think
Well,
we'll take
let's-
Drinky Bird down.
And perhaps we'll.
You know, he's glad to greet you. All right. So this show is not this show is called Cats Are Now.
We'll talk about other
Well,
things
just
later.
Cats. No, it's called This Is Now Bridge to a Better World. And I'm Teresa Mitchell.
And I'm Ani. And good morning. Let's just sort of launch into it, shall we? We have a lot of things to cover, and we want to start covering them, don't we?
Yeah. Well, we picked a sort of centerpiece. And another heinous act by the main perpetrator of heinous acts, it seems, in the political sphere these days, a certain Mr. Trump. And don't knock that over.
You carry on, and I'm going to save things.
It's irreplaceable. It's like she knows. Okay, so
yes, go ahead, knock over the sacred fossil dish. Go ahead, cat. Okay, sorry.
all right,
Carry on.
we'll start over. Okay, so Mr. Trump went before a meeting of minds, and the minds that were meeting were oil CEOs. And you could certainly easily guess that he'd be very friendly to them, but he went a step beyond that and just openly begged them to bribe him with $1 billion. Now, you would think that was what, on the 9th? Several 6th?
Yeah, that was earlier this month, but it was reported on the 9th by the Washington Post.
And Ani sent to me an article in Common Dreams, which is an excellent source that you should be pulling up all the time, in which the author pointed out that this was only covered.
I keep moving this because you keep moving out of frame. I'm just going to say.
This Bribe Me Act was only covered and only for a total of, I think she said, 48 minutes on MSNBC. Now, MSNBC has targeted the left to center audience, and so it's not.
It's on brand.
Yeah, it's on brand and is not getting out into the general press, even though it was first reported in the Washington Post. So an article in the Washington Post, some mention on MSNBC, and the upshot is pretty close to censorship. I mean, this is a major heinous act by a contender for the presidency, and
who I'm gonna say is already on trial currently.
Yeah,
for corruptive campaign influencing from his previous run for the presidency.
And I think he's what you'd call technically fascist scum. And if people are going to, if people are trying to make up their minds, what president do they want to have? He should not be presented as he is, for example, often by the New York Times, as an equal contender, as someone who is serious and, eligible for as heavy an office as the presidency of the United States to start with. But if you know nothing about Trump and you'd like to make up your mind about what sort of policies would he promote, I think that probably one of the most important stories and something we should be talking about at least as much as his pussy grabbing is that he begged for $1 billion bribe from the oil industry and told them that if they do bribe him, he will make sure that they don't have to worry about any sort of regulations. Global warming will be not discussed, and they can crank up fossil fuels. And he said, you'll make your money many times over.
That it's a great deal for them, in fact. He says, in fact, to leaders of oil and gas firms that apparently include ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Occidental Petroleum, that $1 billion donation is a great deal for the industry because of the taxation and regulation that they would save thanks to him. So this is wildly quid pro quo, right? Which we don't actually allow in our politics, at least not officially. And it seems to me just about unfathomable considering Trump was he was impeached and not expelled for quid pro quo machinations during his presidency. So you'd think maybe on trial for campaign corruption, was impeached for, maybe he would learn. But in fact, we are seeing clearly he has not. Because of the reporting, damn little though there has been of this act, Jamie Raskin,
Rah, rah for Raskin, I say.
who is one of the ranking Democrats in the House, actually wrote to the heads of American Petroleum Institute, as well as 8 additional companies, including ExxonMobil and Occidental, Chevron, and the venture Global LNG, to question them about Trump's, I almost said Crump's, Trump's quid pro quo offer. Raskin writes that Trump's unvarnished quid pro quo offer is especially troubling evidence in light of recent accounts that the U.S. oil industry is drawing up ready to sign executive orders for Trump aimed at pushing natural gas exports, cutting drilling costs, and increasing offshore oil leases in case he wins a second term. He cited, recent findings in Politico about those ready to sign orders that are being put into place. These preparatory actions, Raskin goes on to say in his letter to the captains of industry, he says these preparatory actions suggest that certain oil and gas companies, which have a track record of using deceitful tactics to undermine effective climate policy, may have already accepted or facilitated Trump's explicit corrupt bargain. He also highlighted findings from the January Oversight Committee Democrat staff report, which shows that when Trump was in office, he accepted nearly $8 million from kings, princes, and foreign states, including the People's Republic of China and Saudi Arabia.
So he's already a criminal.
Yeah, absolutely.
In so many ways. I mean, and the pussy grabbing thing is it's molestation. It's a crime.
It's horrific.
Yes, and so somehow this this phenomenon is treated as if it were legitimate. It's not. And the fact that these big news organizations treat him as an equal candidate means that they are very soft and maybe promoting fascism. They're really just kind of hoping that they can toss the whole democracy thing out the window and report on celebrity affairs and make more money that way. So in the meantime, of course, Trump is very disturbing and entertaining. And he points that out from time to time. All the cameras are on him because he's such a bastard. And this is going to go on for a while, but I want to examine what effects this is having, how dire the climate situation is right now. I could hold up a graph, but if you went to college, then I could just tell you that the y-axis has gotten very straight, and we don't know at this point whether this tremendously hot year last year and this tremendously hot year this year, which got so much hotter, so much faster, is representative. I mean, is that y-axis just going to keep going, or is it going to zag down as it usually does and then zig back up? We don't know what's the term? There's a statistical term for that. We don't know the extent of variation, or that's the wrong term. Anyway, we don't know at this point. It is possible that that graph that shows the temperatures getting higher and higher month by month, and showing the arc of the graph showing the heat in the oceans and the heat generally being visible above a graph of all the other years. It's so bad that it doesn't even blend in with other years. The signal is so loud right now that we have to ask, how soon shall we die, and in what manners? And
into that, and I just want to say, this is Trump's quid pro quo to the oil and gas industry. his offer to fuck the planet and all of us inhabiting it so that he can line his coffers with more blood money. Uh, well, that's against the backdrop of the idea that our climate catastrophe, which has been underway for some years now and is rapidly intensifying, has already killed upwards of 1 million people. At least some estimates are showing 4 million people. And how have those folks died? It's not through the apocalyptic sort of end of the world scenarios that we often see in pop culture, which we often talk about as a credible threat that this is how the world ends. Suddenly we are encased in ice or completely flooded or whatever it is. That is not actually how people are dying right now. The devastating effects are adding up from floods, from droughts, from wildfires, from extreme heat events, from famine that are being caused by the flooding and the droughts. So this has an ongoing uh, effect of causing excess deaths. Very few of them are being attributed to climate change directly, but they are being caused by, the effects of climate change. And that is the backdrop against which Trump is offering his quid pro quo. There are estimates that over 100,000 people a year are dying of climate change events in India. Over 150,000 people a year are slated to die of climate change events in China. And that's what's happening now. But for the sake of $1 billion, we'll forget about all that. Keep
What a
on
deal.
drilling.
They know it's a deal too. I mean, he's absolutely right about that. I want to talk about, both things. I guess I'll just go back and forth. I mean, this is, I want to talk about how bad the climate change is and how bad the reaction is and how well it's being manipulated. And something about that mindset. But Ani, you were pointing out that the Federal Elections Commissions just voted to hide contributions even more than they are under Citizens United. So we have that dynamic very strongly present. I mean, that is the principal dynamic in our elections right now is big money from big donors.
And, there are those of us who are working to try to revive democracy, try to infuse more democracy into the system by making sure, at least if big money is going to be there, that at least the public would be able to tell where it came from. But earlier this month, as Teresa was pointing out, the FEC, and I think actually earlier this month, I mean yesterday, the FEC voted all 3 Republican seats on the FEC voted to hide contributions even further. And so I find that counterintuitive, really. I mean, it's kind of the exact opposite of what we need when Trump is offering quid pro quo to the fossil fuel execs, when, when we see the egregious effects of big business in politics. It seems like we want to have more light on who's donating, right? Not less.
Yes, and we have to remember that they have no right to do this.
Yeah.
This is anti-democratic. It is heinous. I was laughing at Tat's comment, oh, goody, heinous stuff. Yeah, we're talking about the heinous stuff today. But this is in the context of aspects of climate change that are becoming more clear. For example, zoonotic diseases certainly includes COVID. If we go with the main theory, even if there was some manipulation in a lab, the fact is this disease came from a stressed bat colony. And that's the way zoonotic diseases work. Do I even say zoonotic right? Is it zoonotic? I don't know.
I've always said zoonotic.
There's 2 O's there. Anyway, you have a colony of organisms that is stressed by something. And all over the world, of course, organisms are being stressed and being wiped out by climate change. And so predators, for example, take them and take in whatever diseases, viruses bacteria, parasites, etc., that they have learned to, I say learned, I mean evolved to deal with. And so these diseases get out into the environment. We're talking about Zika, we're talking about anthrax, and we don't know what else. And in the case of India, for example, and Thailand and China, and to a lesser extent, the southern United States, we have direct deaths from heat. And as we were talking about earlier, it's easy to say that, that old person died of kidney disease. And when you're trying to hide it, sometimes they're so brazen as to find, say, a couple dead in their unair conditioned mobile home because their air conditioner just failed during a heat wave, and say, oh, well, we can't say whether it was the heat. Well, yes, it was the heat.
Or maybe they just perished because they would have anyway that week together in their
who can
air conditioner.
I
Who
mean,
can say?
But the numbers will say, if you actually do the numbers and do the data, and your government organization isn't so captured by industry that you can actually do that work. We have storm deaths, we have crop losses, we have displacement stress. People certainly die of displacement. When I moved to this place 19 years ago, I collapsed at one point, and I realized that I was too old even then to do the moving myself. Next time I move somewhere, somebody else is going to have to do a lot of the work because it's too much stress. And you have to pick up and move when your place has been smashed by a storm or flooded, or the pests have gotten too bad. Because another aspect of global warming is that the insect populations, sure, they get wiped out in places, but insects will move, and they are moving towards the poles. And so there will be insects, for example, in Portland, that will move up from south we're not used to seeing, and they will have an effect on us and on our crops, and we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we know that will happen. So while this is happening, this is frightening people, and reactionary people, people who don't want to get involved in politics. I mean, there's a Venn diagram that largely overlaps there. That this stress is pushing them to take easy solutions. And so here comes Trump, and here comes the corporations who fund Trump, and they know that the easy way, the quick way to get political power in a terrifying and stressful situation is to play the demagogue. And
because when you're afraid, you want Big Daddy to save you.
Yes, Big Daddy. It's exactly that. I mean, when I think about it, it sounds insulting, but it's really very accurate. We say people want some access to power, but their memory of that, the way their minds are going to turn subconsciously is, to find a big daddy, a big bad daddy who's very confident and can make things happen. And you don't know how it's going to work, but you know that you want to be with Big Daddy. And this is revealed if you look at MAGA, if you look at the MAGA cult. It's really kind of pitiful, and we sneer at them, but look at what they actually do. They have prominent displays of infantilization. They dress silly and stupid. They know they look stupid. They look like children. They act like children. They have prominent displays of submission. This is all important for a cult that has a daddy figure, and this is what they're doing. And this is a cheap and dirty way to get power for the oil industry and make sure. I mean, they better, if they want to survive the way that they exist now, they better give those billions to Trump. So there's a logic to it. And there's, of course, the rest of us want to push back on that. And it's very difficult to push back. What we want to do is be honest. We want to engage people, eye to eye, and make logical points against people who have decided to go reactionary. I won't say go fascist. They end up fascist. But people who are acting on being reactionary, who are afraid, who have decided to do this, do not react, cannot be convinced. And so we are in a position where, though we wish to be compassionate, though we wish to do the right thing, our choice, we can't heal them in the space of time before the election. We can only defeat them, and we must.
At the polls.
Yes. And they're trying to intimidate us too. For example, Greg Abbott recently pardoned a murderer who had murdered a leftist, Black Lives Matter protester who was protecting the group holding an AR-15.
A veteran who was in the Black Lives Matters protest, who was legally carrying his firearm because he was a veteran and was licensed to carry.
Yeah, this is Texas, and so people don't get killed for carrying their rifles.
Unless they're black.
Yeah, he was black, and he was, he's supporting the left. And so Greg Abbott has made this big deal of pardoning this guy all the way. He gets no ding on his record. He gets no parole. He gets to carry a gun after this. And what he's saying is, we're going to get you. And we can kill you if we want.
Compare and contrast that to how, say, campus demonstrations are being labeled as violent right now because some windows are smashed and some graffiti has happened inside hallways. That's, again, to compare the state's use of the term violence for their convenience. I just want to point that out. Murderers on the right side of the equation getting exonerated by Abbott, while campus demonstrations to end the genocide are being labeled as unacceptably violent because property has been damaged.
Because, the powerful are scared of this. And, we've kind of lost Texas in that regard. I mean, not that we can't get a Democratic win out of Texas. That's not what I mean. But I mean that degree of intimidation is now present in Texas. And it is also exerted across the nation by our police forces. Not every single one, but most of the big municipal police forces are very obviously, very blatantly pro-Trump. And in a fascist takeover, the police are very important because not only are they armed, present, ubiquitous if they want to be, and terrifying, but they carry the legitimacy of the state because they have, up to the point of actual civil conflagration, they have a monopoly on violence. They're certainly much better at it. There's a soldier-like attitude in our police forces. And so the plan for Trump to win has a lot to do with the intimidation that is exerted by our police forces. And so what do we do about that? I think one thing that we have to do up front is say that a police force that acts politically has lost its legitimacy, just as Greg Abbott has. He is no longer a governor. He is now a fascist dictator of Texas. And we cannot allow police to claim legitimacy to collect their salaries if they're going to be political violent militias. And I suggest that we actively purge them now. And one thing that also allows us to fight this is to assure people, for example, the people who plan to go out to the polls to intimidate non-white people from even showing up. They're going to show up with an AR-15 on their shoulder. And we have to assure them, yes, every one of you will be arrested. That's going to be difficult. There's going to be pushback, but we have to show up with our cell phones and, be right in their face and say, what are you doing with that gun? You're intimidating people. Just have the cell phone right there and just, push them as hard as you can, because we're not going to convince them. They've gone to the other side.
So I want to just, once again, dial it back for a minute to look at the dark money thing in politics. The 3 votes of the Republicans on the FEC were blocked by the 3 votes of the Democrats on the FEC. So it did not prevail. It was deadlocked as a decision. But it is, I think, quite startling that during this time when democracy is on the ropes, that there is such a brazen act by the FEC. I just want to note that Craig Holman, who is from Public Citizen, said that commissioners of the FEC, regardless of party affiliation, always defended the need for disclosure of campaign money sources until now. It's truly disturbing to see half the commission now undermining the core principle, which is so important to an open democratic society, as is our ability to vote, right? The Voting Rights Act, it happened. It's never been perfect. Greg Palast has been reporting for decades on how corrupt the voting system in this country is, and how, especially in places with a large minority population, large populations of people of color, polls tend to experience idiosyncrasies, power outages, gosh and gollies, just got to close the doors, lines that are around the block, lines that go on for hours. We've seen all of these sort of dirty tricks to try to keep minority rule in power here in this country. But now it's really just going off the rails. And, as Teresa was pointing out, the open intimidation is being encouraged from the Freedom Party.
We to go into detail a little bit more on that. We cannot allow, we have to address our city councils and mayors, and we have to say the police, for example, cannot display that blue line flag. They cannot display a black flag. They cannot display political symbols at all if they're going to be police, and they must be fired when they do it. And they must be told by their hiring organizations, mayors and city councils, that this is not going to be allowed, and the firing must begin now. You must start firing people who display the blue line, because these people are saying that they are with the fascist coup.
Radio. And I'm just going to put it out there in terms of supervillains that are running amok in our country. Mm-hmm. It seems like no discussion of supervillains would be complete without looking at Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, the governor of a state that has a front row seat to climate catastrophe, right? Ron DeSantis, who has a state with a whole lot of coastline that is situated in the midst of waters that are breaking records for their high temperatures week after week, right? Teresa has talked about the rapidly rising temperatures around Florida. And even in this backdrop, we have DeSantis signing into law this week an act that prohibits mention of climate change in Florida legislation, and that deprioritizes any policies that would deal effectively, with climate action. This is actually at a time when Key West reached 115 degrees, which tied with the previous record for high temperatures. It's unfathomable to me that corrupt dumbass of a governor has signed legislation to actively bury your head in the sand, do not do anything about it. We are open for business. It eases, the same legislation eases regulations for fossil fuel pipelines and the fossil fuel industry. At the same time, we can't mention climate change, and we deprioritize anything that would effectively deal with this thing we can't talk about anymore. So that is this sort of head and assness of epic proportions, would you say?
Yes. And another way that we need to deal with it, speaking of the election, is civil disobedience in places that, for example, deny the right to provide relief to people standing in line in the heat in some places, or in the rain or whatever, to vote. There should be civil disobedience in mass, people showing up with waters, snack plates, everything. 100 people showing up to give 30 people snacks and then disappearing when the cops show up. That would be beautiful. An anti-democratic law cannot be obeyed.
Right. But I do want to actually have a little tiny piece of hope on the horizon.
Yeah. Give us some hope.
Well,
what's on the horizon?
It goes right back to Jamie Raskin, who I think is my hero of the week, as we're talking about cartoonish supervillains in Trump and DeSantis and the three Republicans of the FEC, who are all just seeing what they can do to worsen the problem, how fast, how far. Jamie Raskin is there in Congress, who they had a to my notes. There was a budget, U.S. Senate budget oversight, U.S. Budget Committee hearing that was held earlier this month that looked at the efforts of major fossil fuel companies and trade groups to delay all climate action. And this is a Senate budget hearing that was based on the investigation by the House Oversight Committee a couple of years ago into the deceptive greenwashing practices of Exxon, BP, Shell, Chevron, and the American Petroleum Institute. So this committee, the joint committees released a report that speak to the greenwashing. The report is entitled Denial, Disinformation, and Doublespeak, Big Oil's Evolving Efforts to Avoid Accountability for Climate Change. It's about a 60 some odd page report. You can find it pretty readily, and I would suggest you do. Representative Raskin says that the joint report and documents that they have discovered show how, time and again, the biggest oil and gas corporations say one thing for the purposes of publicity and public consumption, but do something completely different to protect their profits. Company officials will admit the terrifying reality of their business model only behind their closed doors. And then they say something entirely different, false and soothing to the public.
Criminal recidivism.
According to Raskin, the companies and trade groups investigated have made public pledges to abide by the Paris Agreement and then internally acknowledge that meeting those pledges are impossible and they're not trying. That they have shifted from denying climate science to boosting natural gas as part of the solution, which it's not. It is absolute greenwashing. They have publicized investments in low carbon technologies that then internal memos back and forth between them admit those are not likely to work at all. They've depended on trade associations to promote their climate deceptions and lobby against effective climate action. And they've used their partnerships with academic institutes to greenwash their image while influencing research and gaining access to politicians. Gaining access to politicians like, say, major dollar fundraisers at Mar-a-Lago and tossing over some money for a little, quid pro quo, as you said.
There you go. And it's absurd when you look at it. For God's sake, clean coal. Clean coal.
Oh, that beautiful, beautiful clean coal.
Yes. Green hydrogen, which is from fracked natural gas. It's like, well, God.
Yeah, it's enough to make your head effing explode.
I'm going to go soak my head.
Renowned climate activist Bill McKibben says that the hearing represents a shift in attitudes of some senior Democrats towards fossil gas. He thinks that we might be actually getting to the point where it might be politically possible to actually take on the bad guys, thanks to these reports coming out and really shaking up a little part of our representatives of our congressional arm. Raskin did not mince words. He concluded his testimony by referencing Jared Diamond's book, Collapse, which, if you've read, it's not a lightweight book. It has the assertion that one contribution towards civilization's demise is the capture of political and social power by a narrow subset of society, which is committed to its own profit and power rather than the common good of the whole. Thanks, Jamie Raskin, for referencing Jared Diamond's book Collapse into the congressional record. And thank you for your stalwart work in getting this acknowledged. Yeah.
At least we have Raskin. Well, it's an absurd situation, but we do have some power. Well, we always have some power, so let's use it. That's where I'm coming from today.
Yeah, indeed. Let's use it. It is so important, in fact, to educate ourselves so that we actually know what's going on. We can counter when folks say, climate change. Yeah, the weather is really weird, but who knows? Sometimes weather's like that. When we hear friends and family with disinformation or misinformation about what's happening scientifically to our planet. Also, this is a huge part of the migration around the world. And so some of the folks who are at the southern border, which we hear is a crisis, and I think it's really hugely a politically manufactured crisis that's dealing in people's human misery. A lot of folks have left their homes because of continual flooding, because of landslides, because of famine, because their homes are no longer livable due to climate change. And so this is a situation that seems like it's only going to get worse, and we have to shed light on the political processes that are enabling it, in fact, encouraging it.
It's such an easy distraction. Boo! Brown people. Boo! They speak Spanish. Oh, no, tenemos que aprender español. We can do it. We need these people. And it's so absurd to be afraid. But people are afraid. And so, in comes Trump and says, oh, well, I'll save you. And by the way, it's okay to be racist.
And be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
Yeah,
be very, very afraid, because all those other people,
diseases,
everyone, as he says, I alone can save you. I am your vindication.
Your revenge.
What the hell? And just this, not about climate change, but about fascism in our country and stuff that's happening here and now. I saw this just that last night, very late, and I just cannot end up the show without actually mentioning it. The acclaimed Israeli historian Elan Pape has revealed that he was interrogated for 2 hours at the Detroit airport by federal agents when he arrived in America. Pape is the professor of history and the director of the European Center for Palestine Studies at the University of Exeter. He is a veteran of the 1973 Arab-Israeli War, and he's now an outspoken critic of the Israeli occupation. He is an acclaimed historian. He is Israeli, and he is an academic, right? And he was questioned for 2 hours by federal agents about his views on Hamas, about his Arab and Muslim friends in the U.S., what he thought about Israel. Did he consider that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza? He said he was allowed to enter the U.S., but only after agents copied the contents of his cell phone. Right. I just wanted to make sure that we knew that was happening, because that is not that it's not acceptable. It's fascistic.
Fascist.
And that is now in this time, and not even should, heaven forfend, we see a return of the orange shit gibbon and the ongoing nature of Project 2025 unrolling around us.
The whole nation would be a red state.
Like before even that, this is happening now. So what we can do is encourage each other to take heart, take action, stay aware, stay informed, and speak out. It is, every week we say this, and it is so important that we do it. We need to encourage each other to speak out to our friends, to our families,
and push hard against the fash. Push hard and keep it on the level. If they try to quibble about, groping pussy, for example, don't argue about whether it was locker room talk. Just say he is a molester. Do you support molestation? Do you support a molester? Don't let them move the argument past that. I mean, if there's any point in arguing with them at all, I'm not sure about that.
All right.
Yeah, I've already said that. So
we have no rant control. And with that, I'm just gonna
give a little love via tarot.
I'm also going to say you are watching us. This is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Ani.
I'm Teresa.
And here we are every Friday morning with you.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. And
please,
I love the comments.
Please do hit the like button on the video. I can get my thumb in the screen.
Press our buttons, baby.
And please do subscribe. We've got a new subscriber this week. Thank you. And please let us know what you would like to hear us focus on in the future. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on what we've talked about this morning. Please do comment below and leave your comments for us here on This Is Now, Bridge to a Better World. Yeah, like and subscribe. I said that, right? I think that is obligatory YouTube speak. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about our community and sharing some love in it and helping each other out. So, towards the end of every show, I look at some tarot cards and really try to focus on what is happening in our community. Right now, we are still in a waxing moon. So it's the time of bringing things into fruition. If you want to meditate for peace, think about increasing peace. This is the time to make things bigger until we get to the full moon. And then, we go into a diminishing phase after that. We'll talk more about that at a future show, perhaps. But right now, the tarot cards, right now we are in that period of increase. So I think as we focus on that, let us increase peace, let us increase joy, and let us increase our own well-being, our own internal fortitude, so that we can increase our clarity and speak truth to power. And these are the cards I have pulled for today. We have the we have the 10 of Cups. We have the 6 of Swords, and we have the 2 of Cups. And what do these cards mean all together? Well, it is likely that there are things that you feel like you have done wrong or you haven't done well enough, that there are mistakes, and there may be a tendency or an impulse to kind of pull back and withdraw and hope no one saw your error. That you are maybe fearing a little judgment at this point. Maybe you're well out of step with other folks in your life, in your family, in your workplace, and it's a little bit hard to think about bringing everyone together for that big family feast, right? A lot of us are dealing with some alienation. A lot of us are in different healing processes, and so allow me to say, if you feel like you have not lived up to your own values, if you've done something that you feel ashamed of or embarrassed by, talk to your very closest loved one. Talk to that person that you trust to always give you a good and accurate reflection of yourself, and see about making a path forward, so that you can atone. You can actually take accountability, make yourself accountable, and help to repair any harm that you've done, or even to see that maybe you didn't actually harm anyone, that you maybe misstepped and you're embarrassed by it, and it's just time to move on past it, because we all make mistakes, and it's important to be compassionate to ourselves. As long as we take accountability and try to repair any harm that we've done, we keep on moving, because there's nothing else to do. We are human beings, and sometimes we err. And when we do, it's important to know that it should not paralyze us. It should not stop us. And sometimes it's not even that we have done a thing that's embarrassing, but in fact, it's a situation that is just not giving us any more. It's just not giving us any more love, whether it be sort of a job, a part of our community, a relationship, a friendship, something that is just like, you've been too hurt and it's time to sail away, and to really set your sights on the horizon and move into some new territory. It can also be that. So see if those things apply to you. pay some attention to your heart. Pull your very closest advisors, your loved ones, your bestest friends towards you, and get some support in actually working through this situation that's causing you not that's causing you some griefs, causing you some hard feelings towards yourself. And so that's what the cards say. Be kind to yourself. Be compassionate towards yourself like you would be compassionate towards your friends. We all make mistakes. Love yourself. And we have to make ourselves bigger. We have to encourage each other to keep on keeping on and keep on speaking truth to power. You are hugely important. You are a part of this struggle for justice, and to turn things over to a world where compassion and love and justice prevail. So that's what the cards say. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning.
Seems like good advice. Thank you. Well, yes. And as I said before, I love the comments this week. So keep on keeping on with that. And I guess we'll be back next week. We plan on it. We'll have more to say.
Yes,
Who
indeed.
knows what will
Yes,
happen in the
indeed, we
meantime.
will.
I'm following the trial. I refer to it as my Schadenfreude fix. So we'll see how the trial of Trump goes. I wish it were a trial for him trying to destroy democracy, but that's been knocked off the board by the Supreme Court so far.
So now we're wrapping it up.
Now we're wrapping it up.
This is not the time to start a conversation. That's next week, maybe.
Yes, I'll probably talk about that next week.
We love you all, and thank you for joining us. Please share this with your friends and family. Let's grow our community on Friday mornings, and our love goes out to you.
And to all the ships at sea. Bye-bye.